Yo, what is good, everybody? It is your boy Golden Falls, Golden whatever you want to call me. And I am back. And this is part 3 of What If Deku had a Pokemon Quirk. Sorry, it is late, so I'm a little tired. But yeah, we are here for part 3. Did I say part 3? I might have said part 1. I have no idea. But part 3 of What If Deku had a Pokemon Quirk. And as always, show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I'm not going to waste that much more of your time, and let's just get right into where we left off, the UA Sports Festival. The UA Sports Festival is finally going to begin. It all starts with a bit of an obstacle course race. It starts with a large corridor, and Izuku goes sprinting through it, and his small frame, being that he is a combustion, actually benefits him quite a bit. He would run through the corridor, dodging and weaving through the people there, and he would easily scale through. On top of that, he would easily get by the robots. I mean, for one, he's extremely powerful, so he would actually trip up some of the robots as he runs through, but more specifically, he's able to kind of cut the legs out from underneath some of the bigger robots and slow them down entirely. It would actually disrupt some of the people also behind him, so he's able to race on through. The crowd would continue to cheer, continue to roar, as Izuku would sprint through all of the obstacles, and this was kind of a perfect thing for him specifically. An obstacle course race is probably the easiest thing for him to do, because of how much strength and power he really has. At the end of the day, it's like balance, control, strength, speed. He has all of that. And when he's even running across the ropes and stuff like that, he easily can run across those ropes as well. When you get to the landmine field though, I mean, it's even easier for him to do stuff like that because he's so fleet-footed that he just gets by all of what he needs to get by in a matter of seconds. And it leaves just this trail of explosions directly behind him. Everybody cheers him on because, I mean, cool guys don't look at explosions, and it looked pretty damn cool while he was running through. With all that said, he would finish number 1, but number 1 would have a massive drawback, because once everyone is finished and everyone is in position now, it is said that the number 1 person, or the person who obviously won the obstacle course race, has a big downside, and that is having the most points. Yes, this might seem like an upside, but it's actually a downside because he's a guaranteed win, having 10 million points. And if he, has 10 million points at the very end of it, of course he gets number 1 in this next event. But at the same time, having 10 million points puts a massive target on your back. Izuku wouldn't really be that bothered by this because he's extremely fast. So at the end of the day, when people try to take his band, he could easily get away. And this is actually a good time for him to try something out. And, he wants to try out something that he knows is kind of a cheese tactic, you could call it, or kind of like an annoying tactic in regular Pokemon. But before the game even starts, he begins, or like right before it, he gets it and he gets his team. He starts to use double team, and as he does this, it creates multiple versions of himself, yes, being that a lot of them are like mirages, but he uses so much so that there is a ton of what looks like him and his team everywhere. But at the end of the day, not many people know what the hell or where he even is and who's the real version. And due to all of the kind of chaos and everything going on, it kind of scares everyone away. I mean, like, why would you want to be directly in front of a bunch of clones of someone that you have no idea what his strength, his weaknesses, how powerful he is? Yeah, they kind of just straight up avoid him. Even Bakugo, to an extent, of course he wants to fight Izuku, but he even knows himself that's probably not the best idea, especially with last time he got his ass beat, so maybe he just stays away from him and just makes sure he can guarantee on to the next round, and which at the end of the day would be the smarter choice, and there would be no shame in making the smarter choice. So that's what everyone kind of does. Avoid Izuku at all costs and hope that they can somehow sneak a win on him in the 1 versus 1 rounds. The cavalry battle would end and Izuku's team, built up of Ochaku Uraka, Tokiyami, and also Mei Hatsume, would be an easy win for them. Very easy, in fact, to the point that it's pretty simple for them to win, as I said before. Izuku would find himself in the very next round, and it was pretty obvious that he would win. But the one he would be going against is by the name of Hitoshi Shinso. Shinso was someone that isn't like many others. He isn't as powerful, he isn't as lucky as many of the other people that are currently there, and he makes this very apparent while he's fighting Izuku. But Izuku himself actually gets caught in his kind of mind control quirk. But as he does, it seems like he begins to tap into the realms of One for All that he didn't know about in the first place. And as he does, this would force a evolution of some sorts, transforming him or evolving him into Blaziken. As he transforms or evolves into Blaziken, he would obviously feel the power of One for All surging within him as he would transform into Mega Blaziken. His power would surge throughout the entirety of the stadium, and his fiery aura would even shock many of those around. But Izuku would look toward Shinso, and he would power down himself, going into his normal human form, and he would hop off the stage. He would tell him that he has no use continuing to fight, and he might look at this as pity, but maybe if Shinso shows off even more of his power, even more of his quirk and what he can do with it throughout, facing many other people, maybe, just maybe, he'll have a chance to gain a chance to more or less go into UA's hero part of the school. Many people watching are kind of disappointed by this because they wanted to see what Izuku was even more capable of against many other people. But all the people that mattered already know what Izuku is capable of, already know what he can do, and the power that he holds within his body, and just the power he holds with his quirk. So, was this pity in a way? Yes, but at the same time, Izuku felt like this was the best choice of action for himself and also the future of Shinso. Shinso is a good dude. He has a strong quirk. So why not give him the opportunity, the chance to show off exactly what his quirk is capable of? And that's the chance he would eventually get, and the chance he would get for sure. But throughout this time, Izuku would get called up by All Might. All Might telling him to meet him somewhere else so that they could speak, and they would have a conversation about what's to come after the UA Sports Festival. Izuku doesn't have any crazy interest in watching the rest of the sports festival. Yes, these are his friends, but he could watch it on the TV right now as they speak. But overall, he's kind of just hanging out with All Might as they speak about All Might's former master by the name of Gran Torino. Gran Torino is kind of a master that is extremely good at teaching his students, and he helped massively in the progress of All Might, especially when he was trying to learn how to use One for All. Izuku may not need necessarily the help in controlling One for All, but any tips and tricks will definitely help. So after the conclusion of the UA Sports Festival, and after everything is said and done, and Bakugo actually winning the UA Sports Festival due to the fact that Todoroki refused to use his other side or his fire side, Izuku would find that he's actually kind of willing to go to Gran Torino's agency, even though it's not really an agency, kind of just like him in his own house, but that's beyond the point. Izuku's actually excited about this because he feels that Gran Torino might be able to show him some things that he doesn't really understand about One for All quite yet. So when that time would eventually come and he would join Gran Torino for massive amounts of training, he would learn that Gran Torino doesn't really have a ton to teach him, but he does give Izuku some training and some advice. And that advice would kind of involve his quirk. he's already been able to transcend his quirk. Obviously, he's seen that his little forms, even though he doesn't really understand them, the creatures that he uses and controls more or less have different evolutions and forms. So maybe utilizing one for all in various different ways, well, that's the way he should think about it. Utilizing one for all, not just in the way that he utilized it now, but maybe in various different ways as well, in which this would interest Izuku. I mean, he's not really 100% understanding what he means by this, but at the same time, this could be an interesting thought. And Gran Torino tells him to think of it like this. Think of how when you make an egg, you can decide to boil it, and you'd have a hard-boiled egg. But you could also decide to take that egg, crack it, and scramble it. Maybe even make a sunny side up egg. Yeah, there's various different ways to make an egg, and there's various different ways to utilize one for all. So maybe that can entail in his own quirk. And this would kind of interest Izuku. There are different forms in terms of, well, Pokemon, and maybe there's even stuff that he can involve in as long as he kind of can hold that insane amount of creativity. But creativity is not the only thing he needs. Willpower, trust, training, all of it. And Gran Torino says that they'll be training for the next couple days, and then also they'll be doing a bit of patrolling. Yes, the kid is already powerful, but he needs to understand limits, controlling his power, and so on. And that's exactly what he's going to teach him. And throughout this time, Izuku does get a hold on controlling and restricting his power, because you never want him to just obliterate absolute, well, buildings and maybe even mountains for no reason. Izuku would think that this is probably a good idea, and probably for the best. So he agrees with Gran Torino, and they train throughout this time, and eventually they would begin patrolling at Hosu City. Hosu City is a pretty populated place, especially for villains. Lots of villains are in and out of this place a lot of the time, so it's kind of a good spot for a bit of patrolling. Maybe you can find some lower grade villains, people that aren't that strong, and so on. But Izuku wouldn't realize that while they're on their way there, they would come across far more than low grade villains. They would come across Nomus. Nomus that are pretty strong, but nowhere near in strength as the USJ Nomu. But still, Izuku thinks to himself that he needs to help Gran Torino just protect everyone at all, and help him protect everyone as much as possible. Gran Torino this time around would actually agree to this, as Izuku would transform into his Lucario form, in which Gran Torino would question why not the other form, but Izuku would explain that he still doesn't have massive control over that form, and being that the other form uses a lot of fire type moves, he doesn't want to burn unnecessary buildings or just do extra damage when he doesn't have to. Gran Torino would smirk slightly, thinking that the lessons that he's been instilling in the kid are already paying off, and they begin to try and protect the people not only on the train that they were riding to Hosu City, but also going through every single city or every single part of the city and alleyway to kind of protect as many people as possible. Izuku zooms through, defeating Nomu after Nomu in insane fashion, and Gran Torino, let's be honest, isn't really doing that much. Not because he can't, but because he doesn't have to. Gran Torino is doing more of the saving, and Izuku is doing more of the, well, strongman work, kind of being that All Might type figure that, well, Gran Torino expected him to be. Izuku is running around, defeating and just absolutely demolishing every Nomu or villain that he needs to demolish, and pretty easily at that. They would watch as Izuku would defeat all of these Nomus, and eventually, well, it seems that everyone was pretty much safe. But that's not the truth. As Izuku's running around, he would eventually come across an alleyway, and this alleyway would have, well, the one and only, the hero killer, Stain. Gran Torino is not too far behind, but Stain is in the midst of about to murder Tenya Ida. Izuku jumps on the opportunity, and he immediately kicks Stain away from Tenya Ida, telling the hero killer to stop now and surrender, or he'll have to put forward lethal force, in which he shows some restraint And the hero killer would look up as he sees Izuku and would even look at his chest that he just kicked in and could feel that he has a cracked stern or a cracked like rib cage, at least partially, maybe a couple broken ribs from one kick. Izuku looks at him and is in a battle stance, and of course the hero killer is kind of weirded out by this. This is just a furry animal in front of him. I mean, what the hell is that? And seriously, this is something else, something that he wasn't really expecting by any means. Izuku tells him one last time to surrender, but the hero killer would shake his head and tell him that he's not surrendering at all. Izuku would shrug as he would use extreme speed, dashing forward super fast, landing a punch and a multiple amount of punches on the hero killer, and the hero killer is already almost completely out of it. Gran Torino would come from a rooftop, kicking him in the face and then kicking him in the stomach and then in the back of the head, knocking him out. Gran Torino tells him that unfortunately these type of villains need to be defeated by like heroes that are instated. He tells Izuku he just doesn't want him to get in trouble, but just know that he deserves all the credit in the world, they just can't give him it. Izuku says he doesn't really care. He's fine with that. He doesn't really have a problem with glory and stuff like that. He knows he'll have his time sooner rather than later, and he still has a lot to learn. And Gran Torino says that he really doesn't have as much to learn as he really believes, but at the same time, everybody can learn a little something, and even Gran Torino admits that training with him and being around him has taught him more things than he could possibly imagine. The capture of the hero killer was easy, but here's the issue. Well, Tenya Ida was here for revenge, and frankly, UA needs to handle a punishment for him specifically, because this was just an idiotic premise. He was really stupid in the fact of trying to hunt down someone like the hero killer, not only by himself, but the way he did it on his own. And he's so vengeful, so unheroic, it was not something that should be taken lightly. He would get in trouble for this, and massively at that, by Aizawa, and Izuku's little internship with Gran Torino would unfortunately be shut down a little earlier than what most expected. Izuku would be kind of okay with this, but at the same time really wanted to work with Gran Torino a little bit more, but luckily maybe in the future he'll work with him again. With all that said though, Aizawa tells them that they have a final exam coming up very soon. Their final exam actually involves a written portion and a practical portion. And Aizawa would kind of explain to them exactly what the written portion would look like, but wouldn't say a word about the practical. Everybody would hear about rumors saying that, oh, well, it's actually robots again and so on and so forth. But even Izuku thinks that that's kind of dumb, because he was able to obliterate those robots within seconds. Like, this would be an easy practical if it was just robots. But, well, he kind of shrugs it off, not really thinking too much about it, because, I mean, if it is robots, well, that's going to be easy. But if it's not, then he's sure that he can adapt and figure out whatever's to come next. But after the written portion of the exam, in which Izuku continues to develop his mind and brain, and frankly, with the dormant powers of many other Pokemon within him, he actually has an accelerated learning rate. Might sound odd, but there's some Pokemon out there that are extremely intelligent. And yes, you could say there are some really dumb ones out there too, but even his main Pokemon that he uses and utilizes have an understanding of mythical forces that are pretty and inherently complex to understand. It doesn't like help him be a super genius, but Izuku is still smart on his own no matter what. With all that said, he finishes his practical exam with relative ease at that, and he goes on, or not practical, the written exam, and he goes on to the practical exam. The practical exam would be a surprise for not only him, but many of his fellow students when they would arrive at the gym at UA High School, and they would see that all the teachers are waiting for them. It would be explained that all of them would take on a teacher. Yeah, a teacher. This would shock Izuku and many others, but Izuku is actually kind of excited for this, thinking that this is a pretty cool idea. And well, Izuku would kind of be brought up by Aizawa, and Aizawa would put a shoulder or a hand on his shoulder, saying that, well, you see, a good buddy Izuku here is a little different. he actually would probably beat down most of the teachers here with relative ease. So we decided to actually pass him immediately, in which Izuku actually smiles and says, "Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Aizawa." But Aizawa says that he still has some legwork to do, though. Yes, he might have passed, but he'll be a test for some of the other students. In which Izuku actually looks at him oddly, and he would look toward Bakugo and Todoroki and tell both of them that they will be fighting Izuku. In which they would be kind of shocked by this, and well, it's because the initial plan was to put Izuku against All Might and maybe even have Bakugo on his team, but the issue with that was that Izuku has already proved to All Might himself that he can outpace All Might, so this wouldn't be that much of a challenge, and they would have to kind of change a lot, and when I mean a lot of things for it actually to matter. And of course, Bakugo would obviously say something smart and snarky, and he would say like, "Oh, I mean, this ain't even fair. Two versus one. Him and Icy are gonna beat him down." In which Aizawa would laugh at and would actually say that he's glad that he said that because Meihatsume has actually finished something up for Izuku specifically, and it kind of works out perfectly because he thinks that, or because they think that it's such a difference that it's 2 versus 1. Aizawa would more or less throw out this giant briefcase, and Izuku would open it up. It's a suit of armor, but not a suit of armor that you would think. It's kind of like a techie version of an armor that seems to be adaptive to one's body, and Izuku thinks to himself that with the aura control of the Lucario form, he'll most likely be able to adapt this armor easily to himself. This armor seems to be really intelligent and smart. Don't get me wrong, it's very good armor, some very highly intelligent armor, and Meihatsume did wonders on it. But only Izuku is going to be able to use something like this because of the connection with aura, and also the connection with a kind of like a key type of energy with the Lucario. Izuku would transform, putting on the armor as it adapts to his body. It kind of puts a shield on his chest and also bracers on his arms, and it seems to kind of not fill up his entire body, but make his whole body into a lethal weapon. Now this is like a boss battle. This terrifies Bakugo and Todoroki, but they try not to show it. They try not to show that they're scared by any means, but Jesus Christ, if you have someone like that, like a monster, like a monstrous creature with kind of like alien-like armor, it feels like sometimes, right in front of you, I think it would scare you too, at least to a certain extent. But how will this battle go? How will Izuku fare against Bakugo and Todoroki? And are there any limitations to this armor? And does Aizawa have a hidden agenda? Well, you have to find out in part 4 of What If Deku Had a Pokemon Quirk. And if you enjoyed, show some love. Leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.